This is Platemark with me, Ann Schaefer. Today I'm bringing you a replay of an episode that ran back in 2021. If you're a regular listener of Platemark, and particularly of the History of Prince series of Platemark, you have certainly gotten to know True Ludwig and me. But today you're going to hear about our art origin stories. This episode, as I said, ran in 2021, and I am inserting it here while I get caught up over at the editing desk. I apologize. Please bear with me. But I think it's interesting to hear what it was about our childhoods that drove us in the directions that we've ended up going in towards curatorial work for me and art history and printmaking for True. So give a listen and let me know what you think. There are no images that run with this episode, so the show notes are short and sweet. I've got to keep it lean and mean today. I hope you're enjoying the History of Prince series on Platemark. I believe completely in its importance and have heard from many of you who teach that you're assigning parts of it to your students, which just makes my entire year, because that is exactly why we did it. I know that the way True delivers art history is unusual, but I think it's engaging and I think it is accessible for folks that find art history to be dry and fact-driven. So bringing life to the history of Prince and how it intertwines with all of our lives. It's the history of our shared visual culture. And I think it's important. So I'm glad we're getting it on tape, and I'm glad that you are enjoying it as I am. All right, I hope you enjoy the episode. Let's get rolling. Hello, and welcome to Platemark. This is Series 2, The History of Western Printmaking. I'm your host, Ann Schaefer, and I'm here with True Ludwig, who is extraordinary.
Okay.
Can't even take a compliment straight.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Printmaker and artist and art historian. And he is our subject matter expert. I'm the color commentary.
Yes. Thank you, Howard Cosell. Howardina?
Does anybody remember him?
Yes, of course.
I do. Okay, so today you're listening to a bonus episode, which is a shorter something that goes in between other episodes. And today's is on how'd you get to where you are?
Origin stories?
What made you get interested in art in the first place? So before we do that, we want to do our positionality statements as usual, right?
Yep.
Right. I identify as a cishet white woman, and I use the pronouns she, her. We're recording this at the Purple Crayon Press, Charles Village, Baltimore, the land of the Piscataway Conoy people.
I'm True Ludwig, and I'm a gay Iowan trans man, and I use he, him pronouns. Anne's shaking her head.
Well, I forgot to say I'm from Connecticut to match your Iowa.
Positionality, man. I think Iowan is, that says a whole lot.
It says it all.
What's the highest form of compliment in Iowa? He's a good worker.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, that's what that is.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't grow up around that.
I did.
I grew up taking a train to New York and all the men in their suits going to Brooks Brothers to buy. Yeah, I know.
No, that's not how I grew up.
I know.
That's where the positionality comes in.
Right, exactly.
Since, we were in the land of the Sioux.
Oh, really?
Sioux City, Iowa.
To tell you the truth, I haven't researched Connecticut.
And where I used to summer every summer was the land of the Chippewa or the Ojibwe people up on the reservation up in northern Minnesota.
Wow.
Absolutely stunning country. In fact, when I was a little bitty kid, Minerva Dahl, who used to make breakfast for loggers at this camp that became the little bitty resort, she taught me words in Chippewa.
What?
Yeah.
You never told me that.
It was just one of those cool things when you're a little kid.
Huh.
You just think it's a cool thing.
Huh.
Yeah. Of course, do I remember any of them? No. But and we actually went to powwows and stuff too. It was very cool.
I feel like there might have been a powwow at a day camp situation for me somewhere.
Yeah, I think in many respects, it was very authentic, Ojibwe territory up there, as opposed to like the kind of
the non-authentic land of the Ojibwe.
Well, no, I'm talking about like Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts and the bridging ceremonies and whatnot, which I think were wildly appropriate. And I should have been a scout as opposed to a campfire girl, which was miserable.
I was a brownie for 2 weeks.
I'll bet 2 weeks. Oh, look at you. That tells us a lot. What did you do?
Oh, we moved.
Oh,
I know. I have no great story.
Well, I have nothing but annoyance to share with that little aspect of my life. Anyway.
All right. So, how'd you get into this thing?
Yeah, how did you get into
How did you get into this thing? In series 1, we did the role of the curator, which turned out to be my origin story, but only starting with how did I get on the road to being a curator, which happened to be a college internship. But for me, my mother was a painter and actually a pretty crack watercolorist, I have to say. And she died when I was 12. But growing up with her, she had a studio in the house in the basement. And, I was always down there watching her do stuff. And she would let me play with things. And you sort of grow up with an artistic personality in the house. My dad was doing a job in the city. And, she was sort of prime. He'd come home and have dinner. And that was about it. So, she had this great. I grew up when I was between 0 actually and 6. We lived in Rye, New York, in this great neighborhood full of kids who still have reunions to this day.
Wow.
Yeah, I was on a Zoom reunion with the Colby Street gang a couple months ago. In the summertime, there was a lot of what do we do with all the kids? So they would organize sort of street fairs and bike races and whatever's. And my mom would organize these art shows. So all of the pictures would be hung on a string from the garage to the tree, and she would make little blue ribbons for people. And yeah.
That's so sweet. I've known you for 16 years and I didn't know any of that.
Yeah. I was a wee thing. I was, 6 when we moved to Brussels. We lived for 2 years. And
that'd be across the pond.
That would be across. My dad got transferred. He worked for a company that was swallowed up by ITT. So we moved to Brussels, and we did a lot of traveling there. So we would go to Bruges and see all the cool stuff, and to Ghent, and we'd go to Switzerland, and Germany, and
you got to do that.
Yeah, we did all. The best trip of our European 2 years was we took a horse-drawn caravan trip around County Cork, Ireland, camping.
Get out.
Yes. And I remember I get motion sickness, so I get
really easily.
Yes,
gotta ride,
that is true.
Gotta ride facing forward on the Amtrak to New York.
Oh yeah,
never backward.
No. Oh no.
And you got to be in a certain spot in an airplane too.
Now, airplane is not as bad, although I can't get sick on a plane. Seasickness. That's always been a sort of embarrassment for me because we had the sailboat as kids. So yeah.
Sorry.
I know. It says it all. I get it.
I know.
Privilege.
No, that's not my point. It's like the kid from Iowa who has problems with corn.
Yes.
Digestive.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay,
that's very kind of you.
Yeah.
But running around County Cork in this horse-drawn caravan at 3 miles an hour was crazy. And you would go to various castles and you'd visit them. And we finally went to Blarney to kiss the Blarney Stone. And it requires you to be up in the tower, and you have to lie down and put your head over the edge backwards, and the stone is down and it's the side of the wall of the castle.
I bet you would rather have died than do that.
I mean, they had a metal grate, of course, and everything.
You're not wired for
that. My God, I was terrified at 7 years old, and I happened to be carrying my beloved stuffed Snoopy with me, and Snoopy kissed the Blarney Stone for me.
Oh, do you still have him?
Yes, her name was Floppy Ears.
Oh, okay.
Is on the shelf in our library.
Okay, so you just trans Snoopy to. Okay, that's great.
Oh, I have a second Snoopy who I actually sleep with still. Props up the shoulder.
Snoopy 2?
Snoopy 2 named
2.0?
2.0 named Heidi.
Yeah. Wow.
I know. I know, both girls. And then I got a smaller one. It's actually a hand puppet, which is also perfect for reading when you stick it under your head. His name is George.
You still have these?
Oh, yeah. They're sitting on my pillow as we speak. Little things you didn't know about me.
Now that you're 12.
Now that I'm 12.
With a son that's 23 and another one that's 21.
Yeah, 23 and 21. Crazy. Yeah, so when we came back from Europe, we were in Connecticut. The museum that my mom would take us to was the Met. I don't think I ever went to the Whitney until I started interning there.
You didn't happen to see the crazy mixed up files of Miss Basil Frank?
Of course.
You did? I didn't even know that existed until I read it to my son when he was a little
Oh yeah, no, we read basically Frank Weller for sure. Yes, and we would go and have lunch in that courtyard cafeteria they had with the fountain and everything, and I was like, oh my god, Mrs. Frank Weller. Yeah, it was kind of crazy. Well, at that point, we had a VW bus.
This part I know.
Not the camper bus, but the regular bus. And so my mom would drive us down, the minivan of the 1970s. So we would drive into New York. And at that point, there was public parking under the Met. There was a garage.
Yeah.
So we would pull in there and we would park there for the day and do the Met and do whatever else we were doing.
Yeah. See, I think that probably is part of the reason why you just kind of go do these things, because it just comes naturally to you in terms of, I'm going to the Met, I'm going to go do this, I'm going to go do that. It's just, yeah.
Well, and now, as a person who's been in museums for a long time, whenever I travel somewhere, I go check out the museum, usually with a critical eye to how do they do the labels and what's their visitor services, what's the entry like, how does the shop function, I'm very critical.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It makes for a fun trip.
Yeah.
When we're both solving the problems of other museums.
Yeah. But I did a lot of drawing in elementary, junior high school, high school. I did one class in college, but the professor was sort of a non-emotive, oh, that's a nice little drawing. I'm like, oh, okay, I need more than that from you. So I kind of gave it up when art history made more sense to me. And then I also took photo. I took photography in high school and college.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, that explains the Anne Millet and that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anne Millet is a photographer who I did a show with at the Baltimore Museum several years ago. Yeah. She's amazing.
Well, yeah, it was an exceptional exhibition as well.
It was. And in fact, in series 1, at some point, I started talking about the store manager at the Shoppers that I shop at for groceries, Phil. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to remember which exhibition he came to see that one time he came to the museum. And it
was that?
And he reminded me that it was Anne Millet, not Alternate Realities, which is what in my memory I thought it was.
All right. Well, actually, that makes even more sense.
Yeah.
That should have resonated with him at least a little bit. Because
I know, but
photography is a little bit more of an easy access.
I know, but I think he was just seeing the equipment, really, the military equipment.
Oh, of course.
And he couldn't sort of move past that to see the layers of meaning. Okay. Yeah, I think. Right. I mean, who the hell knows what he was thinking?
He's like, why did this woman who buys food at my school?
Well, he suggested it. I'm sure at some point I was like, oh, you should come see it. And then he took me up on it. I was shocked.
Yeah. Well, no, congratulations, though.
It was great.
That's a good thing, when you get folks that have never done anything, air quotes, artistic, and they go see what it is that you do, and then they sort of look at you like, oh.
I know.
Yeah.
I feel like I probably have some friends who've listened to some of these episodes of Platemark and are like, I had no idea you did that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So, okay. So now you took some photography. And now what?
Well, then I started taking the art history.
Which was undergrad?
Yeah, undergrad. Yeah. There was an art history class offered in high school, but I didn't take it. Because I don't know, it didn't dawn on me that was, I don't know why I didn't take it. Too much memorization, I think, was what my brain was thinking. Yeah. And so I started taking it in college. And of course, a professor, much like you have affected bazillions of students, it was a professor who turned me on, and his passion was palpable in the classroom. Arne Lewis was his name, College of Worcester. And I just was like, I'll follow him anywhere. He could talk to me about anything. He had wide-ranging interests, and he was just amazing. Amazing. So then, my father told you this story. There was this moment when I was deciding between studio art and art history, and my father figuratively got down on his knees and begged me not to go studio.
Really?
Yes.
I don't think I remember this story.
Oh yeah, he did. He begged me. He said, please don't do studio art. I watched your mother suffer trying to quote unquote make it or whatever. Please don't do that to me. Yeah. And I think in the end, I'm sure I've said this on another episode. For me, I realized pretty quickly that I didn't have the artist need to create every day. You know how writers have to write something every day and artists have to create something. I don't have that. So it was this was a great way for me to, well, I think there's a lot wrapped up in my mom, obviously, who, as I said, died when I was a kid. So there's this sort of honoring her legacy somehow by getting into art history, and museums just made sense for me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how it worked.
And then after undergrad,
yeah,
art history, you went to Williams?
Yeah, I graduated from Worcester
with a major in
art history.
Minor?
No minor.
Just that was it.
That was it.
That's cool.
Full bore. And I worked for 2 years at the Whitney.
So, just the Whitney?
Just the Whitney.
Right.
I worked for, when I interned there during college, I interned for...
This would be the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York City.
Correct.
Which would be sort of like getting to the Emerald City for some of us that grew up in Iowa.
Yeah, and this was the Breuer Building on Madison Avenue, so long before the move downtown.
Yeah, I mean, the real Whitney Museum.
The real Whitney, a great building. I worked for Barbara Haskell as an intern, and then when I got done with school and was working there for 2 years, I worked as the curatorial assistant to Patterson Sims, who was the curator of the permanent collection at that time, and Jennifer Russell, who was the deputy director, who's now at MoMA, I think she's at MoMA. So 2 years there, and then I went to Williams, 2 years at Williams to get the master's, and then I landed at the National Gallery.
Poof, just like that.
Well, it took a year to get the job, but yes, poof.
Poof. Poof. At the ripe age of what?
24, 5?
Oh, please.
24, 5. I know. And then when I got married and started a family, we moved to Baltimore because we couldn't really afford a actual house in D.C. at that point, and we thought we would commute, and that lasted, 3 months or 4 months because it was, with a baby. That's nuts. It's nuts.
No.
I was on a 6:15 train. I didn't get home till 7.
No.
It was crazy.
Marred for life.
Marred for life. So then, it took a while, but then I landed at the Baltimore Museum, which was a good move for me it in many ways. Yeah.
Well, golly.
So here I am.
Well, and boy, am I glad you're here. It's quite the pedigree, Miss Ann.
Oh. Well,
from Connecticut.
Lots of luck.
See, I'm that dopey kid from Iowa. I just kind of always, I grew up in a family that was very artistic, but that was just the way things were. I didn't know that everybody else's parents didn't do community theater, and like my mom was Eleanor Roosevelt in Sunrise at Campobello, and she was Mother Courage, and she was like the grande dame of Des Moines. I know this may sound silly, but Des Moines had two very lively theater companies. My mom was also in a group called the Folk Singers and was occasionally on TV, and they would tour Iowa. Well, yeah.
She worked for the newspaper, right?
Yeah, she was a journalist, taught journalism, did raise a family of 5.
Jeez.
Yeah, I'm the youngest, duh. So are you.
I am.
Isn't it a miracle?
It is.
And my dad, well, he did all kinds of stuff, but in many ways, the idea of community service was at the base of it. He was pioneering programs in disability rights back at a time when polio was just people who had polio were being treated and starting to be mainstreamed as opposed to just marginalized completely. And so, he also worked for...
It's hard to imagine that now.
Oh my God. And like United Cerebral Palsy of Iowa, he was the executive director of that, and he took it from bankruptcy to telethon status with some actual stars of the day. And he designed a pen that would be useful for people with disabilities. It was triangular, the body of it.
I remember that.
He invented that so it wouldn't roll off of their trays and they could grip it more easily. Just basic.
Did he have a patent on it?
Of course not. We have no zero bucks. And he actually wrote an article in the 50s about distance learning, about how a student with a disability, they would have been called crippled or handicapped in those days, which of course is now so wrong. Handicapped, you do understand that comes from cap in hand.
Cap in hand.
As in beggars.
No.
As in invalid.
Oh, are you kidding?
That's where all of that comes from.
Language has baggage.
That's why, when I started going into disability rights, it was, So,
wow.
So it was the idea of service to community was that. But when we were growing up, there was zero money, but the Des Moines Art Center was free and it has a wonderful collection. It was the original part of the building was designed by Eero Saarinen, and the next part was designed by I.M. Pei, and the last part was designed by the guy that makes things look like refrigerators. Oh gosh, I forgot his name.
It's okay.
Anyway, much more modern, but it had a remarkable collection. It had a kick-ass Sargent. It had an amazing Goya.
Not to mention a print collection.
Well, yeah, but honestly, I'd never seen it. I mean,
Right.
never works on paper, but and, we would go around the sculpture garden and we took ballet lessons, and our folks were active in the theater, and ergo, all five kids were. Four of the five of us were in summer operetta workshop. For 6 years, I was performing Gilbert and Sullivan operettas.
What?
Yeah, and I was in orchestra.
Were you? What? Tell us what roles you sang.
Okay, I was Phoebe in Redagore, and
only ever a sister, cousin, and an aunt. So
I started in the orchestra, and then I made it onto stage, and I was in the chorus, and in Pirates, and in Mikado, and then eventually I had a small lead in Redagore, and then I had a major lead in Yeoman of the Guard. Yeah, and by then I was being the president of it, and leadership things by default, but
community.
Yeah, and because the cool thing about this was it was all student run.
Oh.
We would hire our own artistic directors, music directors, all of this, and all of the proceeds would go to a charity, local charity like the Center for Battered Women, or buying materials for people who need Braille. That was just the kind of service that our family did. So there was this artsy thing. I didn't know that wasn't how people lived.
Well, of course, only know what you know.
Right. My dad also, engineered all kinds of international programs. So we were eating sukiyaki and gado gado back in the 60s when nobody else did.
Well, I didn't eat sushi till after college. I remember you telling me, which I thought was such a great story, about the answer shelf.
Oh, the argument shelf.
Argument shelf.
Oh, this is, before God invented water and the internet. It was that the argument shelf family was killer in terms of intellect. And so on the argument shelf, well, next to the complete Encyclopedia Britannica with the big, beautiful atlas. And remember that in the anatomy section were all of the plastic overlays. Oh my God, I love those. We had the complete 1968 bicentennial edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica.
I think ours was 1970.
Well, 68 was a big deal.
Yeah.
My dad had actually sold the encyclopedia.
Oh, gosh.
At any rate, there was that, but there were also Latin, English, Latin, French, German, Indonesian, Italian dictionaries. There was Bartlett's familiar quotations. There was
Thesaurus, probably.
Of course, yeah. Because they also played killer Scrabble.
How about the Oxford English Dictionary?
Well, duh. I mean, all of these.
I had to buy my own copy of the
Oxford. Oh, no. This was
as an adult.
It was the argument shelf, so that if there was a disagreement, it was like, well, look it up, and you had to go look it up, and then you'd have to defend your position on something, or let's say that you were playing. Oh God, my dad could play such killer Scrabble. Like 256 was his highest score for some word that used X with 7 tiles and landed on a triple word score. And I mean, it's just and my parents would almost come to blows doing competitive crossword puzzles in the Des Moines paper. So it was a life of the mind. And even though we were bright collar workers, we had no money. We weren't blue collar workers, we were bright collar workers. We had no money. We lived adjacent to a university. As far as the art thing, it was just that we grew up looking at it and wanting to know about it. And I didn't know. I thought everybody drew, and I didn't know that I had talent. But
everybody does in kindergarten, right?
But apparently
it falls away.
I just could draw what I saw. And, remember the old Coke bottles, the one that were pale green and they had that twist, that beautiful twist that would come down. There was the banner around it and the script. And they did some assessment and said, draw a Coke bottle. The kids draw this outline of a bottle. It could be any random bottle. And I, just because so what kind of a bottle? A pop bottle. I'm from Iowa. So that meant Coke. So I did it with the spin and the banner. And they're like, well, what's this? It's a Coke bottle. You didn't specify. It was like just drawing what you could see. And that was what I was used to doing, and trees look different. They have different shaped leaves and it's just noticing. And so growing up, the thing that would happen was people would push pencils at me, or my grandparents would put together this exam for people who were getting their ham radio operator's license, and they would have offset litho printed pages that we would have to hand collate these things before Xerox machines. And there would be stacks of paper that had printing on one side, but they were Depression era people. They'd give me these stacks of paper. So I had all the paper I could ever need to write and draw. Oh, wow. I always thought every drawing had to have printing on the back of it.
Oh, that's funny.
And oh my God. And things like not having money. So how to make Betty Lou in the House with the Magic Window. She would show people you have construction paper and you can use rubber cement. But if you don't have that, then you can make paste out of flour and water.
Hold on.
Yes.
Betty Lou and the Magic Window is from a television show called
Betty Lou in the House with Magic Window, which was
not like
that was the name of it.
Wonderama or something.
No, it was like a local grown thing, and Betty Lou changed my life because she would do these crafts. Well, she would have things like rubber cement, which was exotic. She would have construction paper.
I love rubber cement.
I never got rubber cement till I bought some with my own babysitting money because it was expensive.
I know.
And so she said you could make it out of paste. You could make paste out of flour and water. If you don't have glitter, you could use salt and pepper because they would twinkle. If you didn't have construction paper, you could color on it. And so she would give you the budget version, which of course is what I did. And so it was always like a how to find ways to get stuff to look great out of nothing. That was kind of how we grew up. It was just simple things that could be made elegant. I guess in retrospect, you made me remember a big thing. And so people would give me stuff. Now, my oldest sister, 10 years my senior, gave me my first set of printmaking tools.
What?
Yeah, I was 8.
What?
I don't know, for some reason, she thought this looks like something you would do well with. So she got me a couple little blocks of linoleum, and some carving tools, and 3 different colors of ink.
And some sprayers.
And a brayer, which I still have because it's the very first brayer. And so I'm like, okay, teaching myself how to do these images. And the very first thing I ever carved was a cat sitting beside a fireplace, which was our fireplace. And it's the mantle with all the stockings hanging down. And the stockings are supposed to spell Noel, right? And I printed my first cards and I gave them to all my family members. And my brother said, that's great. Who's Leon? And because I didn't know that everything reverses, right? But I'm 8, right? And that was also when I learned that when you carve, you got to keep all bleeding material behind the cutting edge.
So I got one of those too.
Yeah, well, mine's that big U-shaped things. Yeah, but so, and that's why in my syllabus when I was teaching printmaking, it was like, if you bleed, you fail.
Right.
That was like rule number 9. Rule 10 was no whining.
Yeah.
So, but the materials somehow magically were there. Like they gave me pastels. I don't think my sister realized she gave me my very first printmaking stuff, and I don't know what moved her to do it. And I didn't know that was something that you could turn into a thing. It was just fascinating to me, like seeing multiples of an image because of the newspaper and seeing those front pages. I mentioned that in another conversation we had.
Right.
But and then I had Clifton Rooney in 8th grade. Clifton Rooney was also part American Indian, but Mr. Rooney had this enormous personality, and he was the art teacher. And that's when I learned about what he would do to teach us about how sharp these tools were and to treat your tools with respect. When he would show us, and we were going to get to work with linoleum tools, and he would inject oranges with red food coloring because oranges have the same consistency as human flesh. So he would do this whole demonstration saying, so don't walk with them like this and then drop it. And it goes thunk straight into the orange and it bleed out. And we're like, so we put the fear of God into all of us. Again, if you bleed, you fail. And that was from Mr. Rooney. Well, that's when I started doing my first carvings. I think it was in 8th grade. I'm like, oh, this is so freaking cool. Oh my God, this is really neat. And I did multiple colors because it was just cool.
Yeah.
Right. He's like, how did you know to use these colors? It's because they're the colors I use. I was
colors that what?
I own. And then he said, I was hoping you'd say because they're complementary colors. And like, yeah. but Mr. Rooney was also the one that made us learn line, shape, form, color, texture, space. He made us learn the rules of art. I mean, he was like this enormous personality.
What a gift.
Well, so you become the people you respect, right? And I got into high school. I didn't get to take as much art as I would like. And I was a surly, withdrawn high school student, but I made a lot of stuff and I designed posters for high school, blah, blah, blah. But that's not something that you major in. That's not, and my dad, my God, flat out said, don't go into teaching. There's no money in teaching. Don't go into teaching. Is that why mom's a teacher?
I was going to say, teachers beget teachers.
And is that why my grandfather's a teacher and my grandmother's a teacher, mom's a teacher, and my oldest sister just finished her, and she's a teacher, and you were a teacher. Is that why we don't do this? At any rate, through a series of events, I ended up unloading semis in a lumberyard for years, a gap year, back when nobody took gap years because they had no idea what to do to go to college. And I went to college, and because my dad had been terribly sick, I was fascinated by medicine and biology and thinking surgery is fascinating. And I loved all that. I had advanced bio, and I did great drawings for all of my, cells and all of the animal bits. And it's just because that's drawing, yay. And so I was going to be pre-med. I got to college, yay. And it was my sophomore year. It was Reidar Dittmann, who was from Norway. He was the first teacher I had for art history, 19th century European art history. he was from Norway, so we had to learn a lot about Edvard Munch,
Yes.
which was fine, Of course, he's such a merry soul, not.
Yeah.
But at any rate, it was the most riveting thing I had ever experienced. The second class I took was with John Makestad, because at St. Olaf College, everybody has names with lots of double A's or O-S-O-N or S-S-O-N.
Yeah.
And John Makestad was an artist as well as an art history teacher. And to me, that was where I went, oh, that's why he's so good. He's a maker and a teacher. That was why the way he delivered it was so fascinating to me. So at pre-med, I don't have the self-discipline, and they hadn't invented ADD yet, so there was no medicine for people who flaked out and couldn't stay focused. I literally had to tie myself to a chair to study for classes in the wee hours of the night. But I could sit and do art stuff, like for 27 hours in a set, and nobody did that at this proper school. Everybody had schedules, and they went to the library for 3 hours, and they went and did this. I didn't do that. Well, there's this thing called art history. It was amazing, and I started taking, for some reason, I took color theory, and I also took architectural drawing. I loved architectural drawing.
Yeah.
See, I was in the very first class that ever allowed girls to take shop.
Yes, we had. Well, I took. Yes, you were trailblazer, because by the time I got through, the boys did home ec with us, and we did industrial drawing and shop with them.
I fought tooth and nail. So I sailed through this architecture like, oh my God, axonometric drawing, this is so freaking cool. And so I took architectural drawing. Ooh, architecture, that sounds noble. But then I took printmaking, and again, that's my junior year. And I was like, oh my God. So that's how I ended up doing art history as a major, and studio art is a major, and I minored in music history because everything goes together. Because history just talks, art history is history with pictures,
right?
With souls, with emotions, and that was all by accident. And then I thought someday I would get, because I didn't think I had any self-discipline at all, because I didn't know how to.
Which we know you do.
Well, I didn't. I certainly wasn't wired properly to behave like others. So I thought, I'll go get an art history degree, because that's the prudent one to get first. And then someday when I have self-discipline, I'll get an MFA in printmaking.
Oh.
So someday, so that I can teach both. That was my goal, was to be able to teach both. Okay. So while I was an undergrad, I did do an internship at the Minneapolis Institute of the Arts, which was absolutely lovely and wonderful. And I realized, oh, yes, museum work.
In the print department?
No, I was in the public programs department.
Oh.
I was the public programs and scheduling assistant. And so ultimately I ended up working at that museum, programming the concert series, so that the concerts would be a way of magnifying whatever current exhibition was up there, but also giving an opportunity to local students that were getting ready for the master's recitals or what have you to perform and with the arts. So it was sort of this whole sense around thing. And that's kind of edgy in the 80s. That was kind of neat. I'd had this internship as a junior, and then I eventually went to get my MA in art history, and I still hadn't had any print history at all.
None of us did.
And then 10 years later, after having my little family, and actually working as an art handler for 4 years,
right,
driving a truck up and down the Eastern Seaboard and delivering art and hanging it in homes and private collections and so on, and in and out of artist studios, thinking, I can do that. I'm that good. I can do that. Okay. And then one day I did a delivery at the Washington Printmakers Gallery in Washington, D.C. And I'm looking at the prints on the wall and thinking, I can do this. I'm capable of that. And I asked a woman, so what does it take to become a member? She goes, oh, it's terribly competitive. I'm like, oh, really?
To become a printmaker?
Or to become a member of the Washington
a
member of the Washington Printmakers. And so you have to submit a portfolio and be adjudicated in and blah, blah, blah. So I submitted a portfolio of my first 6 images I'd made since college. I'm like, what the hell? And I turned them in, and I got voted in, and I went to the first meeting, and this woman looked at me and said, aren't you the woman who came to deliver? I was like, yes, I am. Because that was absolutely indicative of how I am so annoyed by people who presume that they know more or have more value than the person that delivers their art, or handles their food, or cleans their stuff, because they have just as much education, or certainly as much smarts as you do.
Oh, and as much right to be wherever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why I was thinking about that the other day. I was like, how dare this woman just say, it's terribly competitive. Don't even test me, sister.
Yeah, right.
Watch me. And I got in, and I was a member of that gallery for 20 years. And it was good because that gave me a reason to have a new print on the wall every month. You had to have something new on the wall in a frame
Every month?
every month.
Yikes.
And I was on the hanging committee, so that gave me something to hang
Yeah.
every month. And it would give, you would have a solo show every 4 years or so. And eventually, I'm like, okay, I'm good enough to go get my master's in fine arts. And so eventually I did. But none of this was because I thought someday I want to be an artist. It was that someday I want to be able to teach art history, and I want to be able to teach studio art, because those are the kinds of people that I respected, that changed my life. They saved my life, to find something that amazing and wonderful and communicate that to folks, realize that there's that much more. That's how I got at it. And, that I was just that dopey kid from Iowa. I always thought everybody else had a bigger right to be someplace more than me, but I was still going to test them. I know.
All right, folks. So you've heard a little bit about where we started and how we got here.
Lucky you.
Lucky you. And we're going to cut it off there, but I hope you've enjoyed the bonus episode and look forward to more. So stay tuned.
And you'll see Ann and me learning more and more about each other, even though we've known each other for 16 years.
Right, it's true.
Pretty cool. Thanks, Ann.
Yes, thank you, Tro.
Okay, catch you later.
Thank you for listening to this episode, this repeat episode of Platemark. I truly needed the week off to catch up on some things over here at Platemark Central, so I appreciate your patience. I hope you enjoyed our origin stories. I think it's always fascinating to ask artists and whoever my guests are, and I always do. The first question I always ask people is, how'd you get your start? Well, why did you find Prince and art history or whatever the field is? So I hope that you enjoyed it. All right. Thank you to, as usual, Dan Fury for being my sound and editing guy. Thank you, Dan. And to Michael Diamond for the use of his original music. And of course to True for being such a incredible partner in this journey. Thank you for your hard work, diligence, and content derivation. It's a labor of love, people. I truly, honestly can say that to you. It takes hours and hours and hours. So thank you again for listening, and we will see you next time.